Welcome back to the FeaturesTalk Podcast, where we are making vehicle technology simple and relevant for everyday drivers, which is
Mhm.
all of us on the road. And so I am your host, Lisa Bailey, and joining me is our resident automotive product specialist, but also our co-host, Luke First Put. Welcome back, Luke.
Hello. I'm always looking forward to another mini series of Features Talk.
Right, right.
And this is exciting because we're following up on our last mini series.
Very true. Very true. And the mini series is a new thing for us.
Mhm.
When we first had this idea, we wanted to challenge ourselves to try to break down all of what we talk about in our episodes and say, how do we get it in smaller bites and in smaller chunks? And so
Mhm.
we are in our second mini series. So if you missed our Distracted by Design mini series, go back and listen. We covered the standards, the mandates, the infrastructure, and the human layer behind the connected safety ecosystem that's being built around the vehicles that we are all driving. If you're not driving, you will drive at some
Mhm.
point every day. And so today, though, is the first episode of our latest mini series, The Learning Curve Nobody Talks About, which I am really excited to get into because this is where we get to focus on us. And it falls right aligned into the third pillar of the ADAS knowledge gap, and that is
Mhm.
usage responsibility. So, our responsibility when we choose to use and engage with driver assistance systems. And if you're not familiar with the full ADAS knowledge gap that FeaturesFirst Auto has mapped, please visit our website, featuresfirstauto.com, because it really does give a all-around view as how we have identified the gap. And then it talks about the stakeholders and the individuals who can bridge the gap at what phase. And so this new mini series is all about usage responsibility. And so before we go deeper into the mini series, we always like to go over basic terms that will help our listeners navigate each of our episodes. And so this mini series, we're going to continue to follow in that. And so when we think about usage responsibility, Luke, I know, especially as a product specialist, the
Mhm.
moment that the driver has keys in the hand and they're driving off the lot, they are very excited, I'm hoping, about what they purchased, that
Oh
they
yeah.
got what they wanted, right? But when it comes to ADAS, what does that moment actually mean for the driver's role going forward?
Yeah, the big thing about in that moment of what we've often called the handoff
Right.
of when the car goes um, from us and our guided time with the client to
Mhm.
them now just operating it on their own. The big thing for that is the user's awareness of the features at hand.
Right.
And awareness is a big theme. I bring that up because awareness is a big theme that we're going to be diving more into in a little bit here. Um, but that moment is about it's about focusing on presenting those features in a way that is easily digestible
Yeah.
and and easy to understand, but also not glossing over them, in a way that oversimplifies them. And
Mhm.
so then it does move into the user's responsibility.
Right.
Now, when you're with a client, you don't necessarily say to them, "This is your responsibility. Now do this." And so, but
Mhm.
um, it is important for people to know that when you get into a new modern car, it is all about having. It's your responsibility to have awareness of those features. And as product specialists, that's our big thing is making sure that awareness is there.
Yeah.
And that is and this is like the big third pillar of the ADAS knowledge gap,
Yeah.
right? And the usage responsibility is the driver's role in understanding and activating and correctly operating the ADAS features.
Yeah. It definitely, you said something key at first. You said that they have to have the knowledge of them first before
Yep.
they can actually step into usage responsibility. And I see that at such a practical level, just from an investment perspective. If you
Hmm.
have invested in a new vehicle or a pre-owned vehicle, and it has driver assistance systems, and you've paid top dollar, by the way, for this vehicle, you're
Mhm.
going to want, I'm pretty sure you have some level of responsibility to make sure that, okay, I know how to use my investment, right? But what we're talking about is you're taking a little bit more intentionality to know, okay, I have technology in here. I have driver assistance systems. So maybe my responsibility will go beyond the conversation I have at the dealership, and maybe it will go beyond even my first, getting home trip. It's
Yeah.
activating some of the technologies and then not turning them off,
Mhm.
which is another level of the responsibility that we will talk about, throughout the mini series. And that's really the most important thing when we talk about usage responsibility. It hits on so many levels. And so wherever you are as a driver, you can initiate responsibility as soon as you have hand or keys in hand, and you have a vehicle that is equipped with driver assistance systems. Another term, Luke, that you mentioned, and I want to dive a little bit deeper to, is the handover gap.
Mhm.
Okay, so, and this is critical. This is the critical time between the driver leaving from whether you're picking up a rental car or you just purchased a car, and genuinely understanding, so to your point, Luke, the safety technology in their car. That moment, that knowledge gap right there is the widest open gap right now. When you think
Mhm.
about ADAS and how many people that level of automation is actually affecting. And so we've talked about that so many times, the handover gap in our product specialist episode with Carl Anthony, and how that gap can be filled with the product specialist, if there is a product specialist at the dealership, because that is not always a position that is there, and that role sometimes falls on the salesperson. And
Yeah.
so
And
we've talked.
traditionally it has. The
Yeah,
product specialist role is not universally standard at every
right.
place where car buying takes place. And interestingly, it's that handover gap that is essentially the genesis of this entire podcast, because that's how we met.
Yes, exactly.
We met because of that. We met because of that very thing. Was like, oh, this is just another client throughout the day, and then one thing led to another, and then
We
here
are
we are. See, on season what are we on? Gosh, season 3 of our
season
podcast
three.
now.
That's
So I
right.
mean that trying to bridge that handover gap
Yeah.
can lead to some pretty great things. And at the very least, we hope it leads to safer and safer roads for us to drive on, and
Exactly.
safer drivers occupying them. And who knows, if you close that knowledge gap, it may even lead to a podcast. So, but
Exactly.
that's the big thing. That's the thing I like to focus on the most
Yeah.
is that handover gap. When you said that the knowledge gap becomes wider there, it certainly does.
Yeah.
And especially with more and more cars now having as standard level 2 ADAS. And
Yes.
that's another one of our big key terminologies, or one of our big key terms. Go back and listen to any of our episodes. I mean, the term ADAS comes up all the time.
Hmm.
It's kind of our vision, our mission here. And so the level 2 ADAS is a classification established by SAE, which is the Society of Automotive Engineers International.
Hmm.
And level 2 ADAS consists of partial driving automation, and it's partial is the key, right? It's not hands off, but it's partial driving automation, and the vehicle can utilize both steering and speed adjustments simultaneously.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that is, again, not universally standard on every car like a 3-point seatbelt, but it is incredibly common. It actually has been very common for the last several years. So
Yeah.
level 2 ADAS is not guaranteed on every vehicle, but honestly, more likely than not, if you're looking at a new car, it'll be there.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is another one of our big keys, especially for this episode, is that level 2 ADAS is a very, very common thing. And to again go back to the very operative word of that being partial automation, the big
Right.
key of level 2 ADAS is that the driver is always still responsible for any and all movements of the vehicle.
Hmm. And most drivers who do have driver assistance systems, They are using them. Some of them turn them off,
Mm.
and really learning about them. Mostly owners are going to the manual. That's like the first thing that they're looking at when
Yeah.
they want to learn, especially about their car, because every trim is so different. Every vehicle is different, and so we have that as part of a basic term as well. Is the owner's manual, which is the primary reference document for the ADAS features in a vehicle. There are many
Mhm.
other resources that you have accessible to you, digital. There are apps that also hold, I would say, knowledge about driver assistance systems in vehicles. And
Like us, like this
yeah,
platform.
that's right. That's right. And research shows that drivers learn about ADAS either through their owner's manual or most of the time trial and error. So it's
Mhm.
I have them. I don't really know what they are. So I'm just driving and it's working and so or it's not working, right?
Mhm.
And it should be working with their preferred method being at the dealership. So that term trial and error learning, it's part of our term, but it is a documented pattern where drivers discover ADAS capabilities, so what the system is capable of, and its limitations through real world driving rather than structured education, which
Yeah.
can be very risky. You know,
Mhm.
yes, we want you to learn how these systems operate, but not necessarily when you are mid drive and you maybe it's responding and it was completely unexpected. Then your response might not be able to receive what that system is trying to do. And so research shows it's the most common way that drivers learn about ADAS. Though experts note it doesn't always lead to a complete or accurate understanding, which is what we see right now. Most people have a misunderstanding about what self-driving is and what it's not, and if they actually have a self-driving vehicle. And do I have ADAS? Is that self-driving? That is a big, big misunderstanding. And I know, Luke, you can speak to that. Just seeing
Mhm.
customers and asking about features and even what they think the car can do.
Yeah, the number of times I've gotten the question, "Does this car drive itself?" It comes up a lot,
Yeah.
and, and there have been at times maybe some, you know, there have been instances of, in the past, dishonest marketing around how much driving automation cars actually have.
Hmm.
That has come up every now and then, and that has skewed people's view here and there of how much automation a car actually has.
Yeah.
And and every time you get the question, does the car drive itself? The answer to that is, I mean, the blanket answer is like no, not completely, but for any car. But that answer does change depending on what kind of features each individual vehicle has.
Right.
And
Right.
so there are a lot of cars that now have things like, the very basics of forward collision automatic braking
Hmm.
is standard on new cars,
Hmm.
just like an airbag. Lane keep assist
Hmm.
also, these are it's we nowadays are these can be considered some of the basics of ADAS.
Right.
Um, and that is, I think, pretty common knowledge, not a vehicle self-driving itself. That's just kind of what new vehicles have.
Hmm.
But there are some new vehicles, typically usually in the higher end space, where their level of ADAS is comprehensive enough that it can seem like a darn near self-driving experience sometimes.
Absolutely.
Um, but it is important to always note what kind of asterisks are attached to that.
Correct.
And and that big thing there, a lot of times that question, does the car drive itself, that'll happen before someone purchases the car. They're trying
Yeah.
to, do fact finding then. But the it can sometimes come up, or more specifically about the safety features, when the handoff is happening.
Correct. And that's
Yeah.
that term, that handover gap.
Exactly, the handover gap. And so, it's important to know, like, what does the conversation actually look like when the vehicle basically changes hands,
Yes.
or changes operators, I should say.
Yep.
And so walking someone through the ADAS technology that a vehicle has, again, varies depending on
Mhm.
what kind of feature set that we're working with.
Yeah.
And uh, the thing is, only about half of drivers, according to AAA, only about half of the drivers in the United States who purchased their vehicle from a dealership recalled being offered training on the ADAS features.
Hmm.
So, half, like, given that all cars have these kinds of things
Absolutely.
standard, you
Hmm.
would think it should be 100%.
Yeah.
and um and so and then also according to AAA, they said for those who were offered it, nearly 90% took advantage of it.
Yes.
And
And
so of course AAA
mm-hmm.
needs no introduction with just how big, they are, and how far their reach is in the automotive industry.
Yep.
Um so according to that, the drivers who were offered it, 90% took advantage of it. That's pretty impactful.
It is.
And
It
and
is.
for me, what I always try to focus on is, apart from the kind of the infotainment and convenience features, which are kind of their own separate category, I
Hmm.
always like to make sure that at the very least someone knows where to find their safety features to actually see what they are, and the importance of each of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are the big things that I focus on, especially with vehicles being more software defined.
It will exactly, and that evolves that handover, because the
Mhm,
handover now isn't just about what's explained at the dealership anymore. It's about whether a driver is set up to keep essentially set up to keep learning as their own vehicle changes underneath them.
yeah,
And that is a responsibility shift for the entire industry. But it's also an opportunity for drivers to stay engaged long after the paperwork is signed. And
mhm,
so, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the software defined shift.
mhm,
And so, the assumption that that a driver drives off the lot is the same car that they'll be driving 2 years is becoming less true every year.
mhm.
So that software defined shift, now what does that handover look like when we're talking about ADAS features that can be updated, expanded, or even added entirely new after the
Mhm.
purchase through over the air updates? And so when you talk about that handover, Luke, especially thinking about like the role right now and the ADAS and the technology you have to talk about at the level it is now, how does that handover evolve when we're talking about software defined vehicles?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that, not that many years ago, it would have been unthinkable to think that the product you bought, an actual car, could
Hmm. Yes.
could change its capabilities, um, outside of taking it to some kind of custom shop and having them swap in a different engine or something. But yeah, for the handoff, it does change some of the talking points, I should say.
Hmm.
And it is important to know that most new cars um, most new cars have a lot of their safety features pretty much already kind of where they'll be. It's not common that an entirely new feature is completely added
Hmm.
um, afterwards.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes if there's a maybe a difference, like maybe a safety system needs to be calibrated, that will
Hmm.
often be issued in the form of a recall,
Hmm.
well, a software update for that. And we actually have previous episodes talking about actually diving into recalls and how
Yes.
that system works. But it's interesting we bring this up now because in a lot of the vehicles that I work with, there's going to be a big new crop of vehicles that are actually going to have a lot of what are called FODs, or features on demand.
Mm.
And these will actually be things where you will not be, when the vehicle leaves the dealership, you will not be necessarily married to the exact features you bought then.
Hmm.
These cars will actually have the ability, if you, the customer, wants to actually option in these extra features because the hardware is in place. And so, as far as that's going to add a new dimension to this, right? If the automaker issues a thing that says, "Hey, this needs to be fixed or this needs to be updated," that will often come in the form of a recall, of a software update.
Hmm.
And but now where it's going to be, talk about a software defined vehicle. This is going to be getting now into a lot of vehicles that can actually have entire features added optionally.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that handoff or that handover and becomes not just here's what it has, but here's what it can have.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's important to know here's how you can access those features, here's what they can do. And that also, it's important for us to then point out, what I always like to make sure that point out is actually at a hardware level, where are these features?
Yeah.
If you can add these later on, well, how can that be? If the vehicle already left the factory, how can that be that I could add this? And then I always like to point out, well, inside this camera housing, there's another set of sensors in here.
Mm-hmm.
In this body panel, there's a radar sensor here that can, do what it needs to do, and so on. And then it kind of calls into question what day one knowledge is, doesn't it?
Exactly.
And so like what is like day one knowledge is it's usually people say like, oh, something 101,
Right.
the basics.
Not flying anymore.
Exactly. And so the day one knowledge thing kind of changes because you no longer leave going, okay, I've had my training session, I now know everything about my car.
Yeah.
And I now have seen everything it has.
Yeah.
Nope. Far from it. And that's if that sounds daunting, it can be, but again, that's why product specialists exist.
That's right.
That's why we at Features First do what we do.
Yes.
But yeah, that's a bit of a new frontier, isn't it? Of being able to actually update a car substantially.
I mean, and we've had this conversation before. We as a public are used to the idea of updates. We're just not used to having updates
exactly
in real time in our vehicle or while we're sleeping, and then we get back in there and then have to engage in the update. It's not necessarily something everyone is used to, and it sounds simple. It's like, oh, okay, we do that on our phone, but there is a little bit of a learning curve that needs to be highlighted. It must be, unless the frustration that comes with your customer calling saying, I don't know how to work this car. This is not working. This is not working. And they have to come back in and they're frustrated. That's that handover gap. And how does the industry improve that? And first, it's acknowledging that it exists. Acknowledging that the handover gap exists when it comes to driver assistance systems. And it's well documented that it exists. And it's also well documented that customers prefer to learn at the dealership and then continue that on, which would make sense. Because if you think about it, and we've talked about this as well with previous guests about, even the idea of V2X and understanding how the infrastructure will connect with each other. And then thinking about where we are with shopping for vehicles. We're shopping online for everything. So if you think about this idea of software-defined vehicles, I see people shopping online and going, and the handover looks like, I'm going to pick up my device. I'm going to pick up my vehicle. I'm expecting, somewhat of a high-end review of what I'm purchasing, and then seeing maybe a showroom of all of these vehicles as well, but centering it around, really making sure that the driver understands what they're purchasing and then how to use it. Like from a technical perspective, I see that evolution happening at the dealer space, and it is very much tied to this handover gap that we're talking about today.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was just going to say, it's the V2X thing is something we covered a lot in our previous miniseries about the invisible infrastructure, as we call it.
Right.
And that's that's an important thing. Now that's as far as how like, oh, here's how your vehicle will behave with like the surrounding buildings and stuff like that. That's not quite where it is right now.
The dealership. Yeah.
But like you said, it's important to just acknowledge that, what we have now is what it is, but what seems like science fiction now is not going to be before too long.
That's right. And so if you could think about like just the absolute down standard, Luke, if we're talking about even software defined vehicles, because I know you said, you listed three things that are the absolute must for you. But even when we throw in software defined vehicles, so the idea that the vehicle evolves, what is that standard? Because for our listeners who have never had that experience before, this is what they can take and say, okay, this is what I'm expecting if I'm going to purchase a vehicle that has driver assistance systems in it, or this is what I'm expecting if I am a corporate fleet or a fleet owner purchasing vehicles, and maybe for the customers who are renting them, like what does that handover gap look like, or at least that standard?
Right. And so as kind of like a baseline, just
Yeah.
I would say competent handover.
Mm-hmm.
To kind of boil that down, I would say the apart from just the obvious things like, here's where your windows are, here's what your
Right.
steering wheel controls do, just those and here's how you put it in gear, and put it in park, here's your engines or your start stop button.
Yeah.
Aside from those very basic things, and then I would also include phone connectivity in that.
Mm-hmm.
Just do a simple
Absolutely.
Bluetooth connection so that you don't have to do this while driving. Outside of those, I would say more to it being a software defined vehicle, I would say it's kind of like what I mentioned earlier. I would say, um, know what essential ADAS features it has. Show where to find their settings in the system, and I would say with each one, just know at least a simple level how to customize them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, while and now my particular style of this is to encourage leaving them on, to not turn
That's
them
right.
off. It's I don't think it's would be wise for any product specialist nowadays or especially in the future, to say, oh, here's where you can find your safety features and here's how to turn them off.
Right.
That's because one could very easily frame it that way, but that would end up helping no one,
Right.
um, and could end up being actually a rather big detriment if something
Yeah.
goes wrong. But I would say those. Some people like a louder beep. Other people don't like a louder beep.
Right.
Some of the cars I work with, it's by design. They don't make a sound. If you start to drift out of your lane, they don't make a sound, but they
Mm-hmm.
vibrate the steering wheel, and
Mm-hmm.
so you feel it. I've talked before about how there are some vehicles that actually will have vibrators in the seat
Right.
themselves, and so that's kind of a wild weird thing. I would at least want to know how to customize that. So, and that kind of thing, that I know I went into detail about it here, but that kind of quick thing of here's the safety features, here's what they are, here's where to find them, here's how to customize them. That I would say that could be done very simply in about 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that at a very baseline level, that's what I would do before getting into any of the real specifics of or how they behave in certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would do. And it's a really good thing to think about, because it's actually interestingly, we actually had a question from one of our listeners
Mm-hmm.
about that very thing. And one of the best things about our FeaturesTalk podcast is we have a segment called Listener Lane.
Yep.
And returning listeners will be well familiar with this, that we take questions and feedback about each episode, and we like to implement that in here, because our big thing is, if we're here to serve the community, we
Mm-hmm.
want to have the community's voice be part of what we're talking about.
That's
and
right.
and that's the whole point of this. And one of our listeners actually wrote to us and said, I just bought a new vehicle and it has a lot of features I've never used before. The dealership showed me a few things, but I felt rushed. Where do I even start?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good question, right?
Yeah, it is a good question.
And I was really happy that we got that from this listener. And I would say to them, the as kind of like to kind of start the whole thing off, I would say, don't feel like you have to learn everything all in one day.
Right.
And I've said before that when it comes to how safety features improve over time, how technology improves over time, that it's good for us to have patience. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm.
forget what episode that was on, but I know we had a short about it and everything. But
Yep.
it's like it's important to just have
That's right.
patience.
Going
It
through the
takes
growing pains.
right. It takes time, and so don't feel like you have to learn everything all at once. Now,
Mhm.
um, they didn't specify exactly what their dealership experience was like whether the presentation felt rushed or not,
Right.
um, or anything like that. Maybe they felt rushed because it was just a lot of information, or maybe the person was talking too fast. That I don't know. But regardless of that, I would say don't feel like you have to learn it all in one day. The goal of, I would say, the first 2 weeks to 2 weeks to 30 days, first time getting a, let's, and say this is a brand new car in this case, is not to be a master of it all. It's to just be aware of it all. And
Yes.
and this is why I wanted to mention awareness. I said this at the beginning. I wanted to kind of lay that groundwork because it's important to be aware of the features. It doesn't mean you have to then be able to turn right around and give the same product specialist demonstration to someone else when you just bought the car.
Right.
So, and you can't go in and be a master and start using all the technology if you don't know you have it.
Exactly.
And so I would say, before the next drive, or before the next really like diving into the car, I would say, uh, before just kind of turning things on and off and just hoping for the best, I would say know what you have before you decide whether to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to identify the ADAS features in your car by, to return to what Lisa mentioned, the owner's manual.
Mm-hmm.
The owner's manual will have all of those the features that it has or doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
in your vehicle. And a lot of newer vehicles actually have, some vehicles are actually coming without printed owner's manuals now.
Yeah.
Um,
They've got
now,
digital now.
right, they're digital, and I actually really love this. I've seen some digital owner's manuals in the
Mhm.
infotainment system where you can search by keyword, even by illustration, and so
Yeah.
those can be helpful. But if that's not your speed, all automakers do have their owner's manuals in PDF form online.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
if you did that and then printed it out, you would have the owner's manual in paper form.
Yeah.
But it would be important to consult that, and it's important then to, I would say, find where to find them, and then you can see which ones are active by default and which ones
Right.
require activation.
That
Because
is so
not every car has every ADAS feature on from factory.
that's right. That is so
Yeah,
important. That
and
is
the other thing I would say is, make the learning experience a community effort.
yeah.
I would say don't feel like you have to go it all alone. The internet is obviously a wealth of information. We are but a small part of what's out there.
That's right.
And yeah, nowadays we have this literally limitless knowledge and access to limitless knowledge. But when you're faced with the sheer amount of it, it can be overwhelming. I said before, it can be kind of daunting to try and
Mhm.
learn about it. Well, I would say make it a community effort. That's why we do what we do.
Mhm.
It's, how much easier is it to discover something with a friend or family member?
Yep.
Talk to other people who have a similar car, even if not the same model, just a similar make, same brand.
Mhm. Mhm.
Different vehicles from the same brand will often behave in the same way as far as
Mhm.
their safety features and their software. So I would say make the learning a community effort.
Yeah.
Don't feel like, oh, if I felt rushed at the dealership, that was my one opportunity. No,
Right.
it's far from it. Um, I would say the best opportunities for learning can actually happen after you
Mhm.
leave the dealership.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I would say that would be my final thing. If for our listener who says they maybe felt rushed, and like, where do I even start?
Yeah.
Start with, first of all, don't feel like you have to do it all at once. Start with
Mhm.
the owner's manual to just see on paper, here is where I go to see the safety features. And then, like I said, from there, make it a community effort.
Yeah.
Talk to people about it.
I love that you said to make it a community effort because
Mhm.
that is a really great perspective on it. Because that even spans to if you have a team, and then
Yes.
now while you're learning, your team can.
Yeah.
I
Oh
mean,
my
like
gosh. Yeah.
yeah, pulling in. And another thing I love that you said, every single response that you gave was an opportunity to close that trial and error learning documented pattern. We don't
Mhm.
have to learn through trial and error. Everything
Right.
that you said is a way to close that, to make sure that that doesn't happen, that you're not just learning based off of something that randomly happened, but that you're intentionally putting a foot forward. And then, like you said, not trying to absorb it all at once, because it is a lot of information. But if you can just understand the basics of what the technology, what is the purpose of the technology, how does it operate in the car, and then 100% what is your usage responsibility, because
Hmm.
that is what we're talking about today. How am I supposed to use it? And that is beyond the choices that you make, also behind the wheel. It's also mental. So, and we're going to
Yes.
get deeper into that in this mini series, talking about over reliance or not relying enough. And so we will get into that. But that was a great response to that question. I thought
Yeah.
that it just closed that whole gap on that usage responsibility. And so today we talked about the handover gap, and that is that critical window where usage responsibility begins. And we took it a step further with the software defined shift, the idea that the handoff isn't a single moment anymore. As vehicles are evolving through especially the over the air updates, that day one knowledge, like we talked about, isn't the finish line anymore. It's the starting point. So please be aware of that when you choose to purchase, especially a new vehicle today. Software
Hmm.
defined vehicles and the identity of that, we are some way away from that. Go and listen to our episode with Partha. We talked deeply about that, and you can get a sense of when you will actually see software defined vehicles. But we are in the era of that right now.
Oh
And
yeah.
so the next time on the learning curve that nobody talks about, we're flipping the script. And so in episode 2, we're talking about too much trust, not enough. So we're talking about
Mm.
the opposite problem, that drivers who trust their ADAS technology a little too much. And so if you felt like our listener today, a little rushed, a little bit overwhelmed by the features you've never used, like Luke said, the goal is not for you to master it in 1 week. Okay. We just want you to be aware, and you can't
Hmm.
use technology you don't know that you have. And so that's the whole purpose of this mini series. And so if this episode gave you even just one, wait a minute, I didn't know that, do
Yeah.
us a favor, hit subscribe, leave us a comment, leave a question, because we're answering these questions in our listener lane live, and share this with someone that just drove off the car lot, or they just got a new car, or they have a teen. Okay, this is really good information for our teen drivers. And until next time, drive safe.
Drive safely.